Welcome to the After Chat. I'm Michael.
I'm Madison.
And today we are talking about seeing God at work even when it seems like He's not there. Are you ready?
Oh, yeah.
All right, let's do it.
Welcome to the After Chat. Real questions. Real talk. Real life.
All right. So what was your favorite birthday memory?
My last birthday? No. Hold on. How old am I? Yeah, my last birthday. So last year I had... No. It was the year before. I'm so old. I can't keep up with my birthdays anymore. It was the year before. My fiance had come to visit around that time frame, and that was the first time that either of us had gotten to spend one of our birthdays together because we're very long distance in different countries. So he got to be around, and he got little gifts and surprised me, and that was like the first time we've really gotten to even exchange gifts in person. So it was really cool.
Very nice.
Yeah.
So I remember... I got a picture of it somewhere. So I think I was like 6 or 7, and I had like back in the day, like you could get like these cake pans of like all of your favorite characters. Like you could get like a Yosemite Sam cake pan, a Donald Duck cake pan. Like I've seen them at like junk stores now. Like so, but
to make the shape.
Yeah.
Okay.
So like it's a Yosemite.
I thought you were talking about like, you know how like some pans, like some like baked dishes or whatever will have like designs on them. I thought you were talking about like the design on the pan with Yosemite Sam.
No.
Okay.
It's like a cutout of like...
That makes way more sense.
And so this one was Yosemite Sam. My mom baked it and like iced it. It looked awesome. I got a Masters of the Universe He-Man bicycle for my birthday. Like,
very cool.
Super cool. I need to see if I can find it. A photo of it to be put up here. But like, no, that was such a cool birthday.
That's awesome.
Like, loved it.
I love that. That's really cool.
Yeah, that was fun.
Our next question is, what is one dish that you really want to learn how to make?
Beef Wellington. Like, I've seen...
Do you also watch Gordon Ramsay clips on YouTube?
Yes.
Okay.
No. Like, and like, so I've watched him make several of them, like, in various, like restaurant shows and whatever. I've also watched him, like, completely roast and destroy. Like, there's a one called, like, Gordon Ramsay Reacts. And so, like, he's watching other people make things. And he's just ripping apart this one guy's Beef Wellington.
That sounds interesting.
No, it was funny.
I love Gordon Ramsay. He's funny. I haven't yet. I don't have like one thing that I want to make right now. So I live in a tiny house, and I have like a very unique setup for cooking. So I have pretty much, if it can't be air fried or it can't be made in one pan, I'm not doing it because I have a hot plate for my pans and I have an air fryer for the things that need to be baked. But I don't have a great kitchen setup right now. So I haven't really thought about that. But when I was a teenager, I went through a Gordon Ramsay phase. Okay. And I very specifically like hyper fixated on his Eggs Benedict for a while because my dad loves Eggs Benedict.
Yeah, no, it's fantastic.
And so I think it was for his birthday or something, or maybe Father's Day, I made Eggs Benedict, and it went really well. So...
No, I've never made that either, but that would be good.
The poached eggs were honestly the hardest part because I had never tried to poach eggs before, and like keeping them in like a uniform shape while they boil is hard. But yeah, it was fun.
No, I've never poached eggs either.
I wouldn't recommend them. Honestly, if you gave me Eggs Benedict and it was just like a fried egg instead of a poached egg, I'm gonna be just as happy. Yeah. Like, who needs to put in that much effort? Yeah. But I went by the Gordon Ramsay standards, just so we're all aware.
No, but I think a Beef Wellington would be super fun, like, to make. Like, there's so many parts and it's like so like involved. I think it would be fun, but I would want to like have an entire day cleared.
Oh yeah.
Like where I have nothing going on, and because I feel like that's just you're going to wreck your kitchen trying to make it.
Absolutely. And then you like make it, and then it's like it comes out like a loaf.
Yes.
So it's got what is that, puff pastry
Yes.
on it. So then it's like this perfect thing that you've
Yeah.
poured hours and hours and hours into. Are you gonna cut it open and ruin it? Like, that would be hard for me. Of like, I put all this effort into it and it looks pristine.
No.
That would be my struggle with beef
I
Wellington.
think it would be extremely rewarding. Maybe one day. Like
Yeah.
I'm hoping, maybe over spring break, I'll make a run at it.
You'll have to update me if you do.
Absolutely. So shifting gears, since we're going to be talking about what it looks like when we don't really see God around us. Can you just think of a time or describe a time where you didn't feel like God was there?
I really don't know that I have a specific answer for this of a situation. I think there's been portions of time in my life where I haven't been walking with God closely at all. So it's been absent in my mind. But when I look back on the situation, I can see what was being done in that. So I guess that's like the exact example, because in the moment I maybe felt like God wasn't present, but I wasn't seeking his presence in the moment necessarily. So it's like him being far away was 100% my fault in all of those periods of time.
Yeah, no,
Yeah.
I get what you're saying, because you grew up as a follower, and so I very much separate my life like pre-faith and I don't want to say post-faith, because that makes it sound like you're
Yeah.
like, oh, faith's behind me, but
Yeah.
Pre-faith and finding faith. And so there's definite times where before I came to Jesus, and where it felt like there was just nothing there, but like you kind of said, that it was my own doing, because I wasn't a follower. I didn't believe. I hadn't had an experience or encounter with him that I recognized at the time.
Yeah.
And so, but since I became a follower, there hasn't been a time where I haven't felt like God wasn't there. It's usually I've distanced myself in some way.
Yeah.
So that's kind of how I would answer that question. But I can think of it whenever I had flesh-eating disease, I felt very much alone, like God wasn't there, but I also didn't have a relationship with him then.
Yeah.
But I can imagine for some people, there are times where they don't feel him, but they might still know that he's there even if they don't feel him.
Yeah, I think because of some unique spaces that I grew up in, I can't ever separate the thought of being introduced to God from the concept of God is always there, he's always present, and he's always moving, even if we don't, quote unquote, feel his presence.
Mm-hmm.
So it's so linked to me.
Yeah.
Which is great. I feel like that's just evidence of, how awesome some of the people that poured into me growing up were. But that kind of leads me to not really having a specific example for that question. Yeah. Do you have one in particular?
Like I said, whenever I had flesh-eating disease, that was just a very lonely, sad time, for me. But I wasn't already a follower. I didn't really believe in God at all then. Whenever I went through, some hard times after I became a follower, just because you follow God doesn't mean you're exempt from bad things happening or feeling like he's not there. But it very much kind of leaned into we have a saying around here, are you going to let your faith inform your circumstances, or your circumstances inform your faith? So
pretty good saying.
Yeah, that's Pastor Brian Hughes. And so that was it was old. I always had that to kind of lean back on. Is what I profess to be true about God being ever present, being willing to work all things for good. Jesus' claims to never leaving us alone and being with us until the end of the ages, which we'll bring up a little bit more later. Are those things still true? Even whenever you feel a certain kind of way. And so the answer was always, if they're true whenever things are good, then they're still true whenever things are going bad. So I don't really have an example post faith, now that I am a follower, but I definitely have times where before, like, I felt like I was completely alone, even whenever I can look back now in hindsight and recognize that I wasn't,
Yeah.
you know.
That makes sense. Have there been any situations where you maybe feel disconnected from God and you do specific things that help you stay focused on Him when you do feel that disconnection?
Like, I think that's where you go, like, where if I ever start to feel like I'm not as close to God as I was, like, I tend to go back to whatever I was doing, whatever spiritual practices I had going on in my life whenever I last felt like super tight with them. So whether that be sitting in my kneeling chairs, saying, you know, I present myself now to the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, the Father of Jesus, the great I am, as an empty vessel for your Holy Spirit, and doing that silent prayer time, whether it be reading the Bible and journaling, whether it be, you know, praying myself to sleep at night. Like, I just go back to, whenever I do feel disconnected, I go back to whatever the last thing I was doing that was working.
That makes sense.
That's what I do.
Usually when there's some disconnection in my relationship with God, it's almost always, I can't think of an example when it's not this. I'm avoiding something. I'm running away from something, or most of the time subconsciously. Don't even realize that I'm avoiding interacting with God because I also want to avoid this thing that I'm fighting through. I just want to turn my brain off completely. And when I do that, I also turn my brain off to my relationship with God. So it usually just starts with me being like, hey, wait a second, I've been checked out for the past few days. What am I avoiding? And it usually takes a while to kind of pick it apart and figure out what it is. But getting introspective, I guess, is my answer to that. Because, like I said, it's almost always my fault.
No, and it's because God doesn't leave. It's like the story with Jonah. Like, you know, like God said, hey, do this. Jonah says, no, I'm going to go do this. And then where did God lead Jonah right back to? Like, right back to where God wanted him to go in the first place.
Yep.
So, like, are you going to leave God? Because God's not going to leave you.
Yep.
And so, no, I've done that same thing. Where if there's something that I don't want to, you know, deal with, that I'm avoiding, you know, a certain thing or a situation or a person, or just confessing something to God that I don't want to confess, like, you know, it will cause me to do the exact same thing. Like, I'm avoiding something that needs to be dealt with that that I just don't want to face. And God's like, nah.
Yeah. Yeah, even genuinely down to, like, when I'm not taking care of myself the way that I should and I'm not resting well, then what I'm avoiding is real life. But I'm avoiding real life because I'm so tired, because I'm not taking care of myself. So sometimes it is like I'm avoiding something in my heart that I need to process or go to God with, or I've done something wrong and I don't want to acknowledge it. And then sometimes it's just I got out of routine and my brain can't handle daily life without God. But then for some reason it doesn't think that. It just keeps going. So, yeah. It's frustrating every time that it happens, honestly, because then it's like it always comes down to the same exact stuff, and I always forget about it. But we are talking about a unique book of the Bible today that doesn't actually mention God's name at all. Do you want to introduce it to us?
And that's what's really interesting about this, is that he's not acknowledged in any kind of way, but you definitely see his hand at work in the story.
Oh, yeah.
Especially whenever you look at it in the larger narrative of the story of Israel. And this is the book of Esther. And I tried to condense it down to the shortest of paragraphs.
There's a lot of drama in this book.
There is. And we've mentioned it before in our episode on people that didn't really end well. Haman was heavily featured in that. And so definitely go back and look at this story. We're going to hit you with like the 30,000-foot view, maybe even higher. But
yeah, I say there's a lot of drama in it, but I don't mean like stupid silly drama. It's like
it's intrigue.
It's like genuine, like intense drama.
No, this could be like made into a blockbuster tentpole thriller, like
Yeah.
political thriller.
Yeah.
Like, and you would have plot twists and you know, a villain getting their comeuppance at the end,
Yeah.
and people being saved, and like this could be an amazing movie,
It
like
could.
big budget movie.
But only if they banish Haman to the island of eternal tickling at the end.
The
As they do in
VeggieTales.
VeggieTales. That blockbuster was already made, Michael.
I stand corrected. There is an animated version that is phenomenal. That has all of the things I just mentioned.
They do get some details wrong, so why don't you hit us with the main fact?
All right, so the book of Esther is a narrative in the Hebrew Bible that's the Old Testament. That tells the story of Esther, who is a Jewish woman who becomes the queen of Persia. The book revolves around a plot by Haman, who's like the evil king's advisor, to exterminate all the Jews in the Persian Empire because one dude just wouldn't bow down before him during a parade.
Pop off, Mordecai.
So, but that was the precipitating event. Like, one guy wouldn't give him what he thought was his due during a parade. So, as one does, they sought to, you know, move into
Genocide.
I mean, that's where it went. It went from 0 to 60 real quick. So Esther, with the help of her cousin Mordecai, reveals her Jewish identity in like the biggest of plot twists in all of stories. She revealed her identity to the king, and persuades him to revoke the decree because Haman did get the king to go along with it. And in the end, Haman gets the axe in the way that he was going to do Mordecai, and all of the Jewish people are saved. And also another plot twist, like he didn't really see that coming. And despite its absence or direct references to God, the story illustrates different themes of courage and loyalty, and just his divine providence through actions and events that unfold.
Yeah.
And you just kind of see like his whole, because it's based on a lot of promises that had come through the prophets. So
Yeah.
like to an original reader or hearer of this story, like they would have known.
Yeah.
But it would have just been like, how's God going to work? How is God going to show up? But in the actual historical thing, like I mean, it was crazy.
Well,
So that's like the mega condensed,
yeah.
uber succinct
Which-
version of the story.
It's not even like it's that long of a book of the Bible. Like
No.
it's not a ton and ton. It's literally 10 chapters, I think.
Like, it's super short.
Let me make sure that that's a right fact.
So
Yes, there's only 10 chapters, so it's not like it's a long read, but it is really, I think it's really cool.
it's fast paced.
Oh yeah, like even like just the introduction. Let me pull up
Okay.
chapter 1 real quick, because it moves so quick to like we're immediately introduced to Queen Vashti, which is King Xerxes' previous wife. She ticks him off big time,
Yes.
and he sends her packing. He says, "Get out of here." Literally, all she did was just like say no when he invited her to come hang out. That's all she did, and he said, "Get out. Get out."
That's all it took.
Yeah. And then like even just the fact that like Esther became queen of, like, there's so many details packed into that like statement of like King Xerxes kicked out his previous wife and Esther became queen. Well, it wasn't just that he saw Esther. Like it was a nationwide like competition to become like the king's next bride. Like they gathered up women. It wasn't really a competition because I don't know if it was entirely consensual. So maybe it was they were forced to, but some of them might have wanted to.
No,
become.
it definitely had a reality show vibe. But, like, it just it goes to show, like, how everything is amplified to the nth degree on the smallest thing.
Yep.
And so, like, it paints, like, whenever Esther goes to talk to Xerxes later on, like, that's what sets the stakes. Like, that's why that was such a big deal.
Yeah.
And that's why, you know, like, Mordecai had to give her, like, a super big pep talk to get her to even do it.
I need a pep talk before I just have most conversations, let alone going to like confront or make a request of the ruler that you're married to that just kicked out his previous wife for, like, not hanging out with him.
Yeah.
Like, it's insane. There's so much happening in this.
So, that was, so what is, like, we're going to share, like, what was it? Like, so what's the one thing? Like, so, like, and we want to know what you guys think. So please put, like, read some of Esther and then drop what you think in the chat and in the comments. But
Yeah.
so, like, what was something that really jumped out to you that maybe you hadn't seen before?
So I've known this, but I hadn't really thought through it until we were preparing for this episode. I'm trying to find the right chapter that it happens in because I messed up the page I was on. So it's after. If it's after Esther approaches King Xerxes and invites him and Haman to dinner, and all she does at that dinner is say, if it pleases the king, let the king together with Haman come tomorrow. I don't know if I'm reading the exact right spot, but basically all she does is say. She does say tomorrow. So, if the king regards me with favor and it pleases the king to grant my petition and fulfill my request, let the king and Haman come tomorrow to the banquet I will prepare for them. So that's like a weird thing that, like, they pointed out in the VeggieTales version, where it's like she had her pep talk, whatever. She approached the king and said, "Come, hang out with me," and then she says, "Oh, by the way, my request is let's have a banquet together, and then I'll present the request." So she's kind of, it feels like she's putting it off, and she's maybe, like, really, really intimidated to do it. But the thing that stuck out to me is in that portion of time, in between the two nights, King Xerxes happens to not be able to fall asleep. And in that he happens to not be able to fall asleep, he asked for somebody to read out. My laptop is taking off on flight right now. I'm sorry. I just heard the fan kick in and I was like, "You good?" So in the portion of time where it just so happened that he couldn't fall asleep, he asked for somebody to come read him records of his reign. So, like, you think of like a court, there's a name for them, the people who record what happens.
Court recorder.
Of course, that's the name of it. So if you think of, there's somebody, like, in the throne room or wherever King Xerxes works throughout the day, just recording everything that happens. And he's having them read back that. And in that reading back, he's hearing, "Oh, Mordecai, like, a while ago actually saved my life."
Yes.
He caught on to a plot of two people that were trying to kill King Xerxes and told Esther. And Esther ended up going to the king and then gave Mordecai, like, credits for, like, he was the one who heard about it. So he's like, "Wait a second, hold on, this guy saved my life.
And Mordecai's a stand-up fella.
Did we do anything for him? Like, what are the chances?
Yes.
What are the chances that the night before Esther needs to approach someone and ask him to, like, revoke his decree to kill all of her people, that he just so happens to, like, read a story about Mordecai, who is also a Jew and related to Esther, that he had just saved his life. Like, that's, it's a small coincidence where I'm like, that could have been, like, the shift in his brain that could have really tremendously helped down the road him being able to change his mind and trust Esther. I don't know. It's cool.
No, like, that's where you see.
Yeah, it's like a really fun coincidence.
Yes.
But I don't think it's a coincidence.
Nope.
I think it's got at work.
I think that has got at work. And it's especially in light of what I'm going to read here in a sec, for how the Jews were to conduct themselves whenever they went into exile. So the thing that really jumps out to me, it's in Esther 4:14. Now, this is a verse that a lot of people may know, like, even if they don't really read the Bible. Like, a lot of people have heard some version of this. If you keep quiet at a time like this, deliverance and relief for the Jews, like, this is where Mordecai was, like, saying, hey, like, you need to go talk to the king. Yeah. If you keep quiet at a time like this, deliverance and relief for the Jews will arise from some other place. but you and your relatives will die, and who knows if perhaps you were made queen for a time such as this. So, like, he knows that deliverance and relief for the Jews will arise. Like, he knows that that's going to come because that is a promise that God had made to them. And Jeremiah, and so I just want to reference one of those. Like here in Jeremiah 29, this is a little bit, but stick with me here. It's verses 4 through 14. This is what the Lord Almighty, the God of Israel, says to all those who I carried into exile from Jerusalem to Babylon. So now, like, the Jews, like, broke the covenant. Babylon came down, sent them all into exile. Babylon was then defeated by the Persian Empire. Excuse me. So now this is where they find themselves. They find themselves now under the rule of the Persians. Excuse me, sorry. So, build houses and settle down, plant gardens and eat what they produce. Marry and have sons and daughters. Find wives for your sons and give your daughters in marriage so that they too may have sons and daughters. Increase in number there, do not decrease. Also seek the peace and prosperity of the city to which I have carried you into exile. Pray to the Lord for it, because if it prospers, you too will prosper. Like, do the right thing. Mordecai was out there doing the right thing and seeking the betterment of the place where he was.
I love that everything that God is telling us to do constantly in the Bible just flips the script of, like, what is normal for culture.
Yes.
Like, those people, like, stole you away from your land.
Yes.
And are, like, you're oppressed underneath them. Treat them good. Like,
pray for their prosperity, because if they prosper, you will prosper.
That's amazing.
Bunker down and do the right thing.
Yeah. Okay, I didn't mean to interrupt you.
No, that's good. But I mean, that's like it does. It flips the script,
Yeah.
and it also shows how Mordecai doing that
saved, like,
and played a part.
Yeah, it directly played a part in saving the Jewish people. Yeah.
So pray to the Lord for it, because if it prospers, you too will prosper. Yes, this is what the Lord Almighty, the God of Israel, says. Do not let the prophets and diviners among you deceive you. Like, don't be mistaken by false prophets. Do not listen to the dreams you encourage them to have. Like, everybody at this time, they were saying, like, don't worry, like, everything's going to be fine. Everything wasn't going to be fine. And then in verse 10, it picks up, this is what the Lord says. When 70 years are completed for Babylon, I will come to you and fulfill my good promise to bring you back to this place. For I know the plans I have for you, declares the Lord. Plans to prosper you and not to harm you. Plans to give you hope and a future. Then you will call on me and come and pray to me, and I will listen to you. You will seek me and find me. When you seek me with all your heart, I will be found by you, declares the Lord, and I will bring you back from captivity. I will gather you from all the nations and places where I have banished you, declares the Lord, and I will bring you back to the place from which I carried you into exile. Like, Mordecai knew that deliverance and relief was going to come at some point. Like he says it, if you keep quiet at a time like this, deliverance and relief for the Jews will arise from some other place, but you and your relatives will die. Like, if you don't do nothing here, Esther, like, everybody's going to die. Like, the Jews themselves, like, we as a people will be okay.
Yeah.
Like, we're going to be saved. We're going to be brought back. Like, he was able to count on that promise.
I mean, it's a beautiful promise that's, like, full of so much love.
Yes.
But I think it's so cool that Mordecai, in the moment of encouraging Esther, had so much faith to not only stand up and call her up higher and say, this is something that you're capable of doing.
Yes.
And you should do, but he still had so much faith in the moment to say, we're not big enough to mess up God's plans.
Yes.
Like, God's promise is going to be there no matter what.
And that never really jumped out to me the way that it did in this, like, reading through. Because whenever I read that, it just, for whatever reason, like, Mordecai's, like, you always hear the other part. Like, that part always sticks. Like, perhaps you were made for a time such as this. Like,
Yeah.
But, like, but what comes before, like, if you keep quiet at a time like this, like, God's promise is still going to come true.
Yeah.
But you will not have played the part that you were called to play. Like, that part never really jumped out to me. And so it made me think, like, well, what particular scriptures could he have leaned on in that? And that's just what really came out.
Yeah, that's cool. I like it.
So, But yeah, there's a whole lot there in Esther. Please spend some time reading it. It's super awesome. Like, I think we undersold how awesome it is.
Yeah.
If anything else, like, it is a super fun read.
If you need like an introduction before you read it, I recommend the VeggieTales version of it. I do. There's some things they change, but they get the plot points about right.
They bring it down to an age appropriate level.
I defend the classics.
But before we jump into the back half of this conversation, check out this clip.
I have settled this in my heart to the deepest recesses of who I am, for better or worse. I have settled this in my faith. This life philosophy, this mantra that says God is good all the time. He is always working to make something good happen in my life, even if my circumstances are not so good. That's something I've built my whole life on. When I've gone through my worst moments, my deepest valleys, my most powerful feelings that God didn't care about me, wasn't around, or had completely abandoned me, I could come back in those moments to what I know to be true and base decisions on those things instead of the emotions that are constantly changing with every circumstance. In fact, let me give you one last verse from the Bible today. It's become a real cornerstone for me, and maybe could be for you too. It goes like this: we are confident that God is able to orchestrate everything to work towards something good. Do you hear this? This says God is good and He's powerful. He's able. We're confident God is able to orchestrate everything to work towards something good and beautiful when we love Him and accept His invitation to live according to His plan. God doesn't cause bad things. And a bad thing is still bad. But I am confident, and you can be confident, that in good times and bad, when life is great and when it's not, you can know that God is always working for your good.
You know, what Brian said there was, and a bad thing is still bad, but I am confident, and you can be confident of that too, so that in good times and bad, when life is great and when it's not, you can know that God is always working for your good. And, you know, whenever I think of the story of Esther in that light, you know, that was a bad time. Like, that was a rough time, but Mordecai was able to still see kind of where God was working, or at least knew that, you know, God's plans wasn't going to be thwarted. Yeah. But I bet you, you know, like, there was some times where he probably was just like, man, this sucks.
Yeah.
And it was a rough time, and it was probably, I mean, he's a human just like the rest of it, but in hindsight, he probably was able to look back and say to himself, man, God showed up here during this time, God showed up there during this time. And, you know, there's some times in my life and in everybody's life, whenever you look back at it and you're looking to see where God is, where you can see where He was, even if at the moment you didn't recognize Him.
Yeah.
Like, I kind of think of, you know, my family life got really rough there around 6th grade through high school years. Like, that was a really rough time for my family. Like, we went through a lot of, like, we went through a move. There was some, you know, marital stuff between my parents. Like, it got really hard, but I can look back and, like, during that time, and my Grammy showed up, like, big time during that. And, you know, she was a place of peace and comfort and love that, you know, looking back at it now, like, I'm like, man, that God showed up in the form of her.
Yeah.
During that time.
That's awesome.
And even whenever I went through, like, my stuff with flesh-eating disease, like, but that was a time where my parents and I, we got really tight during then. Like, they came down to Texas whenever I was in the hospital. And that was a place of comfort and peace and love. And, you know, I feel like, you know, looking back, like, God showed up there whenever I went through a divorce a while back, like, the way that my small group surrounded me and loved me and kept me focused and pointed towards God. You know, like, those are just times where you look back and you see God showing up in different ways, and it's through His people that He most often does that. And so, like, those are just some times where during it, like, it sucked and it was awful, and I didn't recognize it always at the time. But you look back at it and you're like, man, God showed up in the form of this. God showed up in the form of this. And you just see where He was faithful then. And you start, and it gives you confidence in going forward that if something does come, because it's going to, like something bad is going to come, like you can take hold of the fact that you're not going to be alone. And, there's, Brian referenced Romans 8:28 there. But there's another one where in Matthew 28, verse 20, where he says, "And surely I am with you always to the very end of the age." Like that is something, especially since I become a follower of Jesus, that I can always count on. Jesus will always be with me to the very end of time.
That's awesome.
And that's something that gives me hope, in addition to Romans 8:28, where God will work all things for good according to the purposes of those called to him. So, but that one, Matthew 28:20, I am with you, and surely I am with you to the very end of the age.
Yeah. I was kind of thinking through some different situations that I've been in, and I think a lot of the ones that I usually will think of as examples of ways that I can look back and see God working everything, to my benefit and to my good. A lot of them are situations that I messed up in, and, God did the God thing. He did his God thing and still worked the situation out, and I either was formed into a better person or was brought closer to him or whatever it was. But a situation I'm going to talk about is kind of specific to, it wasn't like a mistake that I made. It was just a rough time. So the start of COVID really is I was really I was on a good kick with I was forming my community at church. I was serving and enjoying where I was serving, and I felt like I was really learning a lot about what I was doing, which at the time I was leading worship. And I felt like I was learning so much. I was creating friends for one of the first times in my life. And then, everything got shut down. And I lived by myself at the time. So I lived in Farmville, and I had a giant apartment, 1,500 square foot apartment, because I don't know why. It was a house. It was a duplex. It was the entire bottom floor.
Okay.
And it was very affordable, which is awesome, but it was also way too big for me.
It's that's bigger than my first home.
Right. It was too big. So, and it wasn't even just that it was massive. It also had really tall ceilings. So I felt, I still had to go to work at the time because I worked at a public library, but we were closed to the public. So my circle was my 3 or 4 coworkers and my family when I was able to go drive over and see them, but they were, about 45 minutes away from me. And I just, a lot of days I would get up, get in my car, drive to work, sit in my office by myself, not see anyone or talk to anyone different, and then drive back home and be by myself. And it was tough. And I'm sure that there's a lot of people that can relate to COVID just sucking in general, because COVID sucked. But in that portion of time, I can look back and see I was really, really able to recover in a way that I had never even thought about doing before. I have always had so much on my plate at once. I've been working two jobs and in school before. I have always been, as soon as I turned 15, I've been go, 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 go. I got my first job. I was constantly keeping my schedule so full that I didn't ever have any time to just kind of sit and be with myself and really dwell and be with God outside of moments of specifically singing worship songs. So I feel like the loneliness that I faced was really a way to kind of slow down and get comfortable. I was lonely, but I was also slow for the first time in my life, slow enough to realize that there's more than just clocking in and clocking out. Even though I was working, it was just less than I had ever had on my schedule as an adult. And so looking back, I'm God really taught me how to be okay with being slow, and me existing is enough for him, and that's the way that I connect to him. It's not all about the things that I do. It's about being with him. So that's
So, and you recognize that in the moment, or was that something in hindsight where you looked back and was like, God really worked on me during that time?
No, I did not notice it in the moment. I shut down, and like I slept so much more than I have ever slept before. Like every night I was like, there was nothing to do when I got home other than just, I had some friends that I was forming at church at the time in a great small group, but I didn't have anybody that lived close to me. I couldn't go out in public at all because everything was closed. I just would sleep to avoid things. Like to avoid how lonely I was. But I think physically I really needed that structured. It was several months of having to be slow in Farmville. And then, towards the end of that, I ended up moving, and I got myself into my tiny house situation. So I was closer to my parents, which was great. And I could start, getting back to it pretty soon afterwards. But for a good few months there, my days looked like drive, work, sleep, sleep. And I didn't know how much I needed all of that sleep. Yeah.
No, and that's what really, and it, like all of that, in the moment, whether it be like the family meltdown whenever I was a kid, or the flesh-eating disease in like '03, or, my divorce that I went through.
Yeah.
Like none of it in the moment. I mean, going into the divorce, like I knew, God, I focused on my breath prayers, like God, God will see me through. Like God will see me through. Like, and so it made that particular thing easier. First one, like it just seemed like, everything sucks.
Yeah.
And you're dealing with it alone. But it wasn't until I looked back at it, looking to see where God was, like at points in my life whenever I denied his existence, where I was like, holy smokes, like God was faithful to me there.
That's cool.
God provided me a place of love there. And I didn't see it in the moment, like you didn't see that. But then it also allows you to use what you went through in a way that can be a benefit of others. So like even like people that have had like weird, crazy diseases or health scares, like it helps you to empathize with them more and be with them in those spaces.
Yeah.
And so like you would, like somebody that's dealing with like loneliness and being alone and being forced to slow down and really become more, introspective and self-examine and all of those things. Like you're able to be there and give a testimony, which is a word we don't really use, but like be there and be like, hey, like I get what you're going through.
Yeah.
Let me tell you how I handled something similar. Like it really allows you to use your broken areas in a way that can be of benefit to others.
Yeah, which is it's awesome. I love the further that I get away from every like, I don't know if benchmark is the right word, but basically like every moment in my life that I think of, this was a huge thing that formed me. So like my first relationship, which ended in a really brutal breakup, and all of the processing afterwards, or COVID, or when I came back to church, or like even things like as small as like when I thought the world was falling apart because they told me I needed to replace the engine in my car and I didn't have any money. Or like I paid for gas money with dimes. Like any time that I've been like in those windows of time, like the further that I get away from them, the more things that I'm able to notice that God worked that for my good. God worked that for my good. God worked that for my good. Oh, and that too. Like it just it grows and it like develops over time. So I like that. I like revisiting things that I've already kind of settled in myself, and then I usually get surprised by discovering some other way to be grateful that God loves me.
Yes. And I think that's a great go-do out of this conversation
That's true.
is to, take some time over the next, I don't know, week or so and like get out a pad and pen or a note on your phone and look back at some, difficult, whether they be large or small situations or experiences that you went through, and just look to see where God was there, even if you didn't recognize it at the time.
Yeah.
And what that does is it gives you a list of things to where you can be like, you know what, when I went through that thing, God was faithful to me there. Like, I may have felt alone at a time, but now that I'm removed from it some, I
Yeah.
can look back and see where God was. And so that way, when something does come up again, because it will, because you're a human on earth, you can look back and say, God was faithful then.
Yeah.
He will be faithful now. He promised me that he would be with me till the end of the age. He was with me there, and he will be with me here, and he will be with me whenever I go through something again in the future.
Yeah.
It gives you, it's called like a spiritual memory.
And those memories and those like things that you've purposely put in your brain to like chew on it's cool to kind of like see them like progressively stack up on each other more.
Yes.
And like now there's certain things where like if I get hit with it, I'm like, no big deal. That
Yes.
used to wreck me. Like they used to like ruin me for weeks and weeks, and I would be so stressed out. I'm thinking specifically about like an argument with somebody or something where like I had messed up in some way, or there was some like still some tension with somebody. Like in those moments, like now I'm able to just think, let's have a conversation.
Yes.
I've learned this before. I know that God is involved in our dynamic, in our relationship, because he's always with me. And, you know, depending on the person, I'm usually it's with somebody who is also a believer. And I don't know, I feel so much more capable, especially after I think through all of the ways that he's been there for me. I'm like, I'm capable because of how he's formed me through
Yes.
these years. And will continue to form me as I go on. Yeah, it's cool.
And you can be confident going into any situation.
Yeah.
That God will be with you.
Yeah.
Because he was with you here and here and here.
Yeah, absolutely.
This was a good conversation.
Yeah, watch VeggieTales.
Yeah. Watch
You'll like it.
Watch VeggieTales.
Specifically
And-
the Esther one.
Read it for yourself. And
Oh yeah, read the Bible.
And
Sorry. Read the Bible, but
that's
also
where I
watch
was
VeggieTales.
going. Read Esther for yourself, and then watch VeggieTales. But really do that exercise this week, and we would love to hear examples from you
Yeah.
guys about where you saw God work at in the past whenever you didn't really recognize it in the moment. And I promise you, if you do that, you'll see him showing up more often than you thought.
Oh yeah.
And let us know what you think. Like, share, subscribe, leave us a review, and we will get you a mug. And we'll see you next week for another episode of the After Chat.
Bye.
Bye.
Thanks for joining us for the After Chat. If you enjoyed this episode, share it with others, post about it on social media, or leave a rating and review. To be the first to hear our next episode, be sure to hit the subscribe button and get notifications for new content. You can also follow us on social media on Instagram at PCC Wired and Facebook at Passion Community Church. For additional resources and links, check out the description. Thanks again, and we'll see you next time on The After Chat.